Hello, podcast listeners, specifically the one who sends us all of this money in the mail. We start off this episode by thanking one specific listener and talking about a little bit of reflection on the last couple of months of JJ Meets World. It's very sentimental. It's not going to bring a tear to your eye, but it's going to make you feel how you feel when you watch the end of Forrest Gump, and you're like, oh, I'm glad I watched that. Also, today's guest is Mr. Dan Francis, a photographer extraordinaire. If you're in the Fargo, Moorhead, North Dakota, Minnesota area, you've definitely seen his work. We dive into photography, we dive into a little bit of the history of it, and it's our first interactive podcast. All of this and more on today's episode of JJ Meets World. Patreon.com/JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprain. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
We received a letter, the third letter, from a super fan of the show, Bartholomew. I'm going to call him Bart. Bart has consistently sent us not only amazing letters, but he's also sent us cash money in the mail in the form of $2 bills. Mm-hmm. His first letter included $20 in $2 bills, and then I was penalized in the next one because I had mistakenly in an episode said this was the second time, or the first time we'd had a guest on for a second time, and he corrected that in the letter. And I want to read you guys a little piece of this because I find this to be very interesting, and I think you folks who listen consistently are sharing a similar experience. So I'd like to think I've learned something. The F5 project is great and necessary. I learned more than I needed to know about Godzilla. I've retold the story of Stingy Jack a couple of times. And as I get on in years, I found the idea of an undertaker being concerned with how we die as welcoming.
Wow.
This gentleman really, here's the thing. If all I did was make these episodes and all that happened was he listened to them, I think it's worthwhile.
Absolutely.
There are amazing stories out there, and I love sharing these stories. And he wraps up with this. What have you learned in the past 6 months?
Oh, that's a good question, Bartholomew.
It is a great question, and
thank you for your patronage.
Yes, thank you very much. And he said he's English and he's going back to England.
Okay,
so this will probably be the last letter for a while now. Sir, you can reach out to us on jjmeetsworld.com.
Heck yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, in fact, you could email me directly. I'm going to put an email address out there, linebenders, LINEBENDERS @gmail.com. So if you've got further thoughts, because of course you can consume these anywhere on the planet. We have people who listen to them all over the place. But it's just a nice little thing that I wanted to give him a specific shout out and say thank you so much for listening. Yeah. And I'm glad that you've gone on these adventures with us. And even though sometimes I think people can conceive this as passive and they're not a part of this story, they are a part of every episode of the story. When we're talking to people, I'm trying to think of questions someone would ask if they were unfamiliar with a subject, or remind guests to tell stories that I know are amusing to an almost universal audience.
Right.
So, Bartholomew, this one is for you, sir. Our guest today is Mr. Dan Francis. You think you guys are going to have a blast with this episode. It's our first ever. You need to participate in this. So we're going to give you a website you can go to see Dan's photography, and so you can see the photos as we're talking about them. Some very unique, interesting things here. And Dan also brought us a giant Wolverine doll.
It's killer. I'm so pumped about that. Our late good friend Matthew Burkholder, who passed away in 2012, is cousins with Dan, and has featured in Dan's photography. He's actually the image you see in the thumbnail for this podcast. And Matt was a comic collector and was fans of the X-Men, and he had this big Wolverine figurine that Dan had gotten, and Dan decided to bring it here and give it to us. So now it's got a place of honor and power up on the JJ Meets World shelf, which is just laden with toy nostalgia.
He also brought it to us in a fleece, very old Star Wars pillowcase. Which really speaks to Dan's sensibility of he embraces the fact that there's just stuff and nostalgia that he loves,
right?
And he's a part of it. I won't ruin anything in this podcast for you, but I think you folks are going to enjoy.
But before we go any further, JJ, I want to make sure that we don't neglect Bartholomew's question.
Oh, of what?
What have you learned?
In
the past 6 months.
Much.
He's asking us, what have we learned in the past 6 months?
I've learned, talk about some of the episodes that Bartholomew has thrown out there, but the Undertaking is, I think, my favorite episode of JJ Meets World, because death is something that we're all familiar with, but we really don't know the ins and outs of what it takes once a person has passed on from this world and their earthly body remains.
Right.
I've also learned what a forward slash and a backslash is. I've had great opportunity to learn about how couples have met and how their stories. You know what I've learned? I've learned this. Everybody has a story.
Right.
And some people's stories are more cinematic than others, but every story counts.
Right.
And that's what I find to be most interesting. So when you say, well, there's, look at this person who's sitting at the coffee shop, they don't have a story. They might have an amazing story for you. So you can't take anything for granted. That's what I've learned.
I've learned something very similar, which is that you can have a really great conversation with just about anyone as long as you're willing to sit and listen and take some time with it. Don't be like, oh, we got to get this conversation done in 5 minutes so we can get out the door. The other podcasts that are out there that are of the same or similar format where it's guest based, they really rely on it's got to be a big celebrity and it's got to be someone of import, with quotes around import. And not that we're against having them on. We'd love to have them on too. But I really like the fact that we talk to our friends and just normal folk from around town here, because they have amazing things to talk about as well.
And if you've got something amazing that you want to talk about, reach out to us. Some of our favorite episodes are people who've reached out to us and said, you got to talk to so-and-so. They've got a great story.
The reason why we call this JJ Meets World is we want JJ to meet everyone on the planet. So let's get going. Let's get people in here. We got to, and maybe that will then help convince you to maybe donate to our Patreon.
That's right. Patreon.com/JJ Meets World. Patreon, Patreon. You can give us some money to continue to do this. We'll continue to put out podcasts, but I'm going to be honest with you folks. The quality is going to diminish greatly if we have to move out of this studio and start recording everything using an old flip phone that I have, which is not even a brand that makes phones anymore. So every dollar counts. We sure would appreciate it. And sit back and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with Dan Francis.
JJ Meets World.
Dan Francis, you're used to being behind a camera, not a microphone.
That is correct.
But I've got to know you. Like, we've showed up at like similar events over the years, and so we've become like de facto acquaintances just by occupying space near each other.
You get to see the same people a lot in downtown Fargo a lot.
You really do, don't you? And then I found out that you are related to one of my all-time favorite people, Matt Burkholder.
Correct, yep.
And it was like, whoa, okay. So this guy's legit. We enjoy that. How long have you been in photography?
So photography-wise, taking pictures in high school, I was able to actually experience the darkroom in high school. I went to high school in West Fargo, and they had a little bit of a photography class, graphic design, back in 99. So I was able to experience the darkroom a little bit. That was kind of like, it was fun to do, but it was like, darkroom stuff. It's not... I didn't. I was in all the art classes as well. So like art 1 through 8. I was in the ceramics classes. So art has always been kind of a part of my life. And then when I realized that I was absolutely horrible at painting and drawing, I went try to decide what the future would hold, and that was more of the graphic design stuff. So long story short, went into graphic design in college, and about 2 weeks after graduating college, I started worked at a photography studio for about 6 years as their graphic designer and sometime photographer. But I was usually doing photography on my own, landscape, and a lot of landscape stuff right away. But then I realized like trees didn't pay, so.
I noticed watching the movie that was called The Crush with Alicia Silverstone and Carrie Elwes recently with someone who is 21 years old. There's a scene where Carrie Elwes is dating this woman who uses a darkroom. She's a photographer for this paper, and he goes, where is she? What's this thing? Why is she putting paper into water? And I was thinking to myself, I was like, you don't understand this because all of your pictures have come out of a printer.
Right.
You just don't get it.
Yep.
Which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a lost art form. The photo studio that I have here in downtown Fargo, we bought it from another photographer he's had it since the 70s, and he had a darkroom. So we have a working darkroom at our studio. So the art form could come back here in downtown Fargo shortly, with maybe people wanting to experience that maybe with their grandchildren or their kids, show them that, the pictures. Even when my kid was 2 years old, he would ask to look at the picture on the back of the camera. Like he knew, where's the picture? I know it shows up in the back instantly and when we grew up, it was the Polaroid that would do that. That was our digital camera. But
right. The most instantaneous took you 30 seconds after it spit it out the front of the camera.
Yep. Other than that, we had to wait 3 days to get them developed, and hopefully some of them turned out okay.
I don't know how something like this really works or worked back in the day. Last night we had photo call for the Santaland Diaries, the one-man show I'm doing at Theater B.
Nice plug.
And right? You like that?
Yeah, we've been plugging that thing.
Pretty hard. If you haven't listened to the Santaland Diaries episode, you should. But while they were taking these photos, they would look at it, and then they'd take the photo, and then they'd look at it, and they'd take the phone and look at it until they got the right exposure or the right, shutter speed. Well, when you're shooting on actual film, you don't have the luxury of taking 25 test shots.
Right.
You certainly don't know what you're getting until later on.
Sometimes they would do Polaroids to get the...
Really?
They would take Polaroids, and that way they would instantly see how everything looks composition-wise, color, what they need to change, and then they would use film after that to just... That way they're not wasting their film. $1 a click.
Did they ever make a really nice Polaroid instant camera where, maybe it's got like a lens capability on it?
Yep. I think there's a Polaroid that has like an aperture of 2.0, which for people that don't know photography, it's kind of like the new iPhone with more of a blurry background, more bokeh is what they call it, but it's more of the portrait, and then everything behind it's a little bit more out of focus. So they did create a Polaroid that can do that. It's not easy to find, but there are Polaroids out there that gets you that nice portrait look.
Interesting.
But it's again probably $1.50, $2 a click every time. So and recently, just 2 weeks ago, I went over to Bismarck and got my portrait taken on the wet plate process with Shane Belkowitz. I don't know if you know his work. He's doing wet plate process. So it's I had to stay still for 12 seconds while he took my portrait, and it was just, if I blinked, it would show, but it's printed silver right on glass, and that'll last for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it was kind of a neat process so I got to see his darkroom experience, and then he just shipped it to me last week. So I have it up on the shelf so that'll be for generations to come. It'll always be there.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Is that why people didn't smile back in the days? Because it took so long for some of the stuff to happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, early, 1826 is kind of the process of photography, but 1830s, 40s, they're perfecting it. Come 1860s with like Abe Lincoln, even, you don't see Abe Lincoln smiling in his pictures because it's probably about 25-second exposure.
And also there was a civil war going on.
Correct.
And so that
too much
probably
to smile
affected
about
it as well.
So modern day photography, there's a lot of so first of all, I think one of the downsides of modern day photography is the same thing with videography, where everyone thinks, well, I got a camera.
Right.
Why don't I do this?
I'm the next Spielberg.
Right. Yeah. And some of them are.
Yeah.
Truth be told, some of them are. The ability for people to create right now is at a peak.
Absolutely.
We've never seen such ease. If you've got an idea and you've got the wherewithal to do it, that's great. But people also think, well, my uncle has a nice Canon camera he got on Black Friday,
Yep.
so he can take our wedding photos for us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you end up with these atrocious looking photos because they don't know about things like composition or lighting. Lighting is the thing that
Yeah.
drives me the most crazy when I see an amateur photographer or videographer. So is it hard in your business these days? Now, you're one of the go-to names in town. So, I mean, that's got to be nice to have such a great reputation behind you. But do you ever find people who say like, "Oh, well, we could just buy a camera for that much and
Correct,
take
yeah.
our own photo"?
There's always a different types of people. There's some people that will respect it. They're like, well, I had a client, and they were like, we want you to be our photographer, not my friend who just bought a camera. And they're like, they're not a photographer. You're a photographer. Like, there are people that do realize the quality that goes into the difference between someone that is some people actually get business cards before they even buy their first cameras. They start building up their clientele, and then they'll become
My brother has a hammer. He can totally
Yep.
do your drywall for
Yep,
you.
I've got a scissors. I can be your stylist and haircut person. There's a lot of good quotes about that. Like chef, like everyone has a stove, but not everyone's a chef, or not everyone can cook. Everyone has a scissors, but they're not a stylist and haircut person. But there is definitely. I'm fine with it because honestly, more memories that are being recorded are great as long as they are printing their images. That's something that I try to push with a lot of my clients is making sure that they're getting their pictures printed, whether it be an album or on the wall. Just because if we hand our future generations a USB disk, they have no idea what that would be. If we gave that to our grandparents, they would not know how to use a USB drive or this computer that I have in front of me doesn't even have a CD drive anymore. And, about 10 years ago, people were taking pictures and burning it to a disk and handing it to their clients. That's where the kind of shoot and burner is considered. But if you hand that to somebody in about 10 years from now, 2030, they will not be able to open those files unless they have a dongle that has hooked up to a CD drive. So
And even cloud storage,
Yep.
who's to say that a massive server error won't
Yep.
happen? And
I've
all of a
got all my
sudden-
pictures saved on MySpace. So
Do you
what could go wrong, right?
Well, oh god,
But
that
it's
is
also
so
the
true.
same at the same time, though. You could also argue that, what if your house catches on
Right.
fire and you only have
Yeah,
physical
that's
copies?
why it's the first thing you save.
ultimately, the only actual response is as many copies in as
Yep.
many formats as you possibly
Yep.
can.
Yep, absolutely. It's for my clients. I have it backed up on a hard drive. I've got hard drives at my house. I've got hard drives at the studio as a backup. So as long as the internet doesn't break, my house doesn't burn down, and my studio don't burn down, all in one horrible moment, I'll have a backup of pictures. And yeah, definitely some hard drives now, they get wirelessly backed up, so you could have that at a different location. And most, if you do your research, Google will be around for a while. So Google Drive, you get like 100 gigabytes for like $10 a year or something like that. As long as something horrible doesn't happen, just make sure that you do have backups of stuff. But that's why, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, if there was a fire, you grab your albums and you run.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure all your loved ones and your cats and dogs are safe, but then you grab the pictures. And now what are you going to drive? Like a whole bunch of hard drives in your backpack and bring those outside. But
We saved them. We saved the hard drives.
Yep.
Now your grandma's wedding will forever be remembered.
yeah, they
Thank
talk
God.
about like how they this generation has the most photos ever taken, but in 50 years, all that stuff could be lost if there is a horrible accident with the internet and a lot of images are lost. That it's the most photographic generation, but at the same time, it could be a generation where there's not a lot of pictures being printed.
I also think a printed picture is an entirely different experience than something you see on Facebook or just on your phone, for the idea that I don't leave my phone open to a picture of my parents on their anniversary sitting on, my desk at work. I have a printed photo of that so that other people can enjoy it. I can see it without having to have the effort to see it. And I also don't see a lot of people crowding around a computer screen to look at photos together the way they do when you have something hung on the wall, when you have a piece that really speaks to someone. It also, I think, has really changed the way advertising has worked too, because you can become pinpoint accurate for the place you want to advertise without having to send a photographer to each individual McDonald's location, let's say.
Yeah.
You can take a generic picture of one of your burgers and then easily put that into somebody's hand who's an employee of the month. And just all you have to do is say, like, all right, three inches apart on your hand and we're good to go. So it must be interesting to be in a business that's constantly evolving. And right now is at a time when, boy, the art of photography is what's valued more than just somebody who can show up and click through a roll of film.
Yeah, content, making sure that they do know, like you mentioned earlier, lighting. That's the big one. Is just the difference between someone that knows what they're doing and someone with a camera is lighting. Posing could be, depends on the subject. Sometimes the unpose is kind of popular too, with just candid shots or giving them to interact without having to be overposed. Sometimes it can be, if you do remember like the Awkward Families, like that would be the overposing of like hands on the shoulders, like it's, that stuff is.
That's, by the way, my favorite pose. Whenever we do something for the line benders, I'm like, hand on the shoulder pose, JJ's favorite.
Yeah. Or holding your cat with the sweaters. But, there is a thing with too much posing and just more of a fine line between that candid where, if you see something like a hand coming out of someone's back, like they might have their hand around someone's shoulders or something like that, and all of a sudden there's a hand and you don't know where it's connected to. Sometimes, you would see how they kind of pose themselves and then just kind of tweak it a little bit to like, okay, maybe just have your hand in your pocket. If they put their hands in front of their crotch, just it looks like they have to go to the bathroom. So usually I have them like put their hands in their pockets or a different, depending on the situation of holding something that they can. But people always kind of freak out about hands, like what should I do with my hands or how should I, stand and such. So
do you have a lot of people who are like, all right, you're going to cross your arms and you're going to look over your left shoulder?
Yep, the real estate banking, that you would see on TV weather people, like the opening shots of weather.
You probably get a lot of requests too for like, can you please make me taller, or skinnier?
Do you have your thin lens on?
And it's like, well, I'll do blemishes.
Yeah.
I'll do things that aren't how you actually look, but this is how you look. That's got to be a bit tough sometimes.
Again, at the same time, there's people that are like, oh, I don't want my family picture taken yet until I lose 10 pounds. And it's like, okay, call me in, 5 years. Or, it's like, because it's just like, it's never, there's always going to be some reason why you don't want to get your family picture taken. And eventually that 5-year-old's going to be a 12-year-old. And then it's like, oh, I never got my family picture because I never lost that 10 pounds or, that can be for guys or girls. They want to always look younger, thinner. You're going to do something with this. And as for headshots, I do a lot of corporate headshots, and that is 90% of the time. So you guys, ladies, they're all like, you're going to put...
Jesus. Wolverine just fell over and scared the shit out of me. Sorry.
There's always going to be, someone that's going to be, oh, can you make my jaw look, thinner? And there is capabilities in Photoshop where you can move in that jawline. There's making the eyes bigger, tummy tucks. There's always ways to do that, but you don't want the person to not look like themselves either. If you show up and all of a sudden they have hair when they didn't, it's going to be a weird thing. But
right, if you go on an online date and you find out that the photo was from 1992 and you're like, okay, what?
Yeah.
One thing that I'm curious to know is, did you ever get a contract to go to schools and do school photography where you just assembly line through all of Mrs. Diekman's class and then Mrs. Christensen's class?
That would be not where I excel in my photography.
Yeah.
Sherling's has a pretty good monopoly on that here in town, especially since Life Touch has gone out of, they got sold or brought off, and now it's a Minneapolis company that used to be a big photography school photography studio out of Eden Prairie.
Would you ever want to do that?
I would say the money is good, but
Really?
oh my gosh, yeah. We're talking. I mean, if we're talking every
Retirement
school,
dollars.
Well, yes. I mean, if every family spends minimum $20 per kid, every school in Fargo, that's.
So do you get all that money then? Is that the way those contracts work?
They work with the PTA. Sometimes they
Really?
they may pay, or the PTA gets some of the money, but then there's always like the underlings of it, but it's definitely Shirley's has their own way of doing their thing with the PTA, making sure that they get their contracts. So
I did pictures at Shearling once for line benders, and one of the things they had was all of the backgrounds.
yeah.
And so I finally got the laser background
Oh, yes.
my parents would never let me get.
Oh yes.
And so I've got an adult picture of me with the laser background that
Yep.
I am over the moon about.
Yeah, no, they've been around for almost 100 years, so they have they've seen a lot, and they have all the backgrounds that you could probably ever think about for families or seniors. They
Whenever
probably have
I-
the white columns and the white cutouts and the class of 2019 letters. So.
Whenever I come out of Don's Car Wash, I see that side of the Shearlings building where they used to have their drive-through.
Oh yeah,
That now
drive
is
through film.
defunct and like, nope,
Yep.
we don't need this anymore. And I always think, well, that's kind of a bummer because when you think of the number of people who relied on photo processing for business,
Yep.
I mean, there used to be places in the middle of parking lots where you would just go and drop
Oh,
off
yeah.
your film and pick
Yep.
it up. Heck, one of my favorite episodes of The Adventures of Pete and Pete involves the Mr. Tasty, I think was the name of the ice cream guy who they never saw his face. They only saw the head. And Ellen worked at a photo mart.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So she saw his photos being developed over the
I
summer.
think they turn those into like coffee little hubs now where you can drive through and do coffee instead of a film. But
For a while, my sister had an idea where she said, I want to start a business called Fair Foods. And it would be one of those little huts. And you would be able to get all the food that you love from the fair.
Nice.
But year round. So, like, you get funnel cakes and all
that'd
this
be a
stuff.
horrible idea for.
I know, right? Like, I'd be like, oh, I'd get so fat.
Maybe they could put that like up on a hill, so then you have to walk. You have to walk up there. And
Cheese curds and those amazing fried donuts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man!
I mean, really, all you need is just 3 giant
Oh,
vats
goodness.
of bubbling oil and.
Well, now Dairy Queen has funnel cakes with ice cream, and that's
Wait, what?
Yeah, they have funnel cakes with powdered sugar with sundae, like a strawberry ice cream next to the funnel cakes. That's dangerous.
Holy shit.
They might have that year round too.
Oh,
so it's
boy.
it's good. It's
Do you
good.
see this glint in my eye? I am one excited camper. Well, I know where I'm going to have lunch today. All right, so we're going to
I'll
try
take
something.
2 of your finest funnel cakes,
Right.
please.
Give me all your funnel cakes and 3 barbecue sandwiches. This is going to be something different that we've never done before, but this episode gets a little interactive. So, Dan, what is the website people can hop to right now?
Sure. It's danfrancisphotography.com and then
Spell
slash
Francis.
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 So I'll start from the beginning. DANFRANCIS photography.com /story ideas. I'll ignore the HTTPS www.
Yeah, I think we've arrived at a point in the world where we don't need that. So, listener, now that you've brought up this page, we're going to go through and we're going to talk about some of these photos that are here. And before this episode started, I was complimenting Dan on the very first photo you're going to see up there, which is a picture of an old man playing chess with death.
Correct. That's the title is Passing Time, and that's Father Time playing chess with death. And then if you zoom in or look on the screen there's real people that I've photographed on the chessboard. So that's actually me being pulled from the chessboard, and then there's like different people like riding a bike or just doing different things that Father Time and Death are playing a chess match. And that was taken in the basement of my downtown photography studio.
I see that like the hourglass is
Yep.
very low, like the time is running
Yep.
out on that.
There's if you zoom in, there's so much hidden stuff. There's there's if you remember from Raiders of the Lost Ark, I believe it has hieroglyphics of R2D2 and C3PO.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of copied that and just kind of drew that into the bricks. There's also like 6 or 7 different religions etched into the stones as well, with also Egyptian hieroglyphics and such. There's Salvador Dali's melting clock on the steps. It's hard to see some of the stuff on the screen maybe, but yeah, there's a lot of like thought. There's the Stargate symbol is on Death's Sigh. So there's a lot of like fun, I had a lot of fun with trying to hide a lot of things in there.
So let's move along. Do you have another image that you would like us to go to or talk, or should we go just down the list a little bit?
Let's see. We could just, I mean, if they go to the second image of the kid with a sled, that was my Norman Rockwell inspired picture. Few of these kind of have a Norman Rockwell feel to them, just because I think he was kind of a great storyteller with his paintings, and he did a lot of. He would do the photos actually, and then he would take a look at the photos and paint, kind of like how Alex Ross does with his paintings and such with Marvel and DC. He takes a lot of pictures, looks at how the shadows fall, and then paints that image, kind of compositing that. So I drove down 8th Street and looked for kind of like the perfect Norman Rockwell house, and kind of has like a gingerbread feel to it too, with this house that has like a slanted roof that leads you to the kid, the sidewalk that kind of bends and leads you to the kid pulling the sled. It's one of my parents' old-fashioned sleds too. So it was a cold day. You can look at the snow. It's like really, really crisp. It was probably about -12 that day, and the kids' cheeks were really that red. And yeah, set up a couple lights, and it was just a fun winter image that I got to create with that, again, Norman Rockwell inspired.
And so when I'm looking at this, you mentioned like the slope of the house. The slope directly leads over to the child. So that's an aesthetic point that you chose.
Yep.
Oh, that's
smart.
I
knew that he was going to be right there. Just kind of had him kept walking back and forth, but that was a spot where I knew that I wanted him to be, was like kind of under that tree, everything kind of leading you to the kid pulling the sled. So that's kind of the difference, again, between a storyteller and just someone who takes a picture. You know, they think about things that, how can you get the most out of a pictures with composition and lighting.
So moving along, the next one, you've got a postman and a dog and a girl in a dress. This is Norman Rockwell 101 as well, too, huh?
Absolutely. So this was my summertime picture of Norman Rockwell. Again, I kind of started with the idea of the overall picture was taken at the Post Landing building, which is right next to the Sanctuary Event Center. And there's a kind of a bigger view that shows the building, but I kept kind of cropping it and telling a story within a story. And I thought this was kind of the main point of that little girl trying to deliver, or maybe getting the letter delivered from the mailman. So it depends on how you want to look at it. But yeah, that was my dog. He was probably about 6-7 months at the time. And all we did was, tell him to come, and he just took off. And if you zoom in again, you can see like that little girl's ankle is like on the side. Like she actually did fall down from that. So props go to her. But yeah, she showed up in that dress, and I got the mailman outfit from FMCT. They had, they have like 2 floors of just costumes, and got to go through it. And they had a mailman jacket, and that was a fun picture to go through.
So, do you consider concept first, and then say, okay, now I need to find a mailman's outfit in this, or do you ever say, I've got access to this really amazing old toboggan, and I want to do something with this?
Yeah, it's hit or miss with the story. So, like the passing time with the old man and the death, it came with the actual title first. I thought of passing time. What could that mean? It could be time-wise and playing chess. Who should be playing chess? Good and evil. Came across like, should it be the devil and Jesus, or should it be, time? I was like, Father Time. And then who could Father Time be playing chess with? Why not Death? Those are 2 people that have a lot of time on their hands. So then it just kind of just formed into a story with that, with chess and Father Time. So I got like the beard on Amazon, and that's my shower robe. It's a Jedi robe. So it's a brown, nice robe with that. So yeah, and then something leads to another. So with the mailman, it was, I want to create a story with a young person interacting with a mailman on these steps, and it's just kind of like a cool building in Fargo. There's always something with boxing too. We'll get to a couple boxing images, and boxing always with me is so I can create so many neat stories with a boxing image, whether it an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. Kind of like I could think of a story with just like a boxer without a tooth, or like a black eye or something like that. But boxing always, even with movies, I love the Rocky movies, Cinderella Man. Just like in that time period, it's really cool with a story of a boxer trying to get to the top.
You like that underdog story?
The underdog story,
yeah,
yes.
you like
yeah,
that?
yeah.
I like that too.
Yep.
Okay, the next one is an image that I think a lot of people around Fargo Moorhead are very familiar with because this pops up quite a bit. I know that you've auctioned off a couple of these as well for charities,
Yep.
different functions. What's the title of this piece?
The Traveler.
The Traveler.
Yep, and that'll be the fourth picture. So yeah, that was taken at the one of probably like a couple weeks after I got my first downtown studio, and thought of a steampunk. I did a lot of research on fun steampunk ideas, and got the costume on Amazon for like $40. Got the goggles for about $35. Had a watch, and it was like probably like an auction box full of watches. And took a hammer to it, broke it a little bit. So if you zoom in, you can see that he's wearing a broken watch. Just little things like that are always fun. Had a old-fashioned watch around his waist too, and just asked. This was my second cousin, my mom's cousin. So Matthew Burkholder, who is part of Theater B, director, actor, and so I knew that he would kind of portray this character in the studio. And he hit it out of the park with the expression. Just knew I was going to just have it very simple, sitting in a chair and kind of looking up, kind of off to the side of the expression. But I just wanted it black and white, very simple, with just the details of the clothes and his expression.
It's a great take on the idea of a portrait, right? So
Yep.
This is something that would have been very common to get this portrait of
Yep.
you taken. But the idea of like, well, where's he come from? Where is
Right.
he going?
Yep.
I dig that a lot. And so moving along, I noticed a couple of these feature a kid. Any relation to you, this kid?
Yeah. So this kid is my son.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Sometimes when you get that like between I'd say 6 to 8, 6 to 10, you can ask your kid to do some fun stuff. When he's like 3 and 4, you look for someone else because you need to capture emotion and I mean it actually works really well because he really wanted to be done with this picture and it works well because that's kind of the story of like this kid was upset or he's sad that I think I titled this one Struck Out. But I was also thinking of other ideas like Waiting for Daddy or something like that. Just getting that emotional response because I mean that expression on him is perfect with just I get that a lot with kids. Like a lot of, I mean, if you look through a lot of these, it's sometimes they're not very happy, smiling pictures because I just don't think that's true to life. Like not everyone is always happy. But like this kid, I mean, it struck out. He's holding that ball. There's a glove on the bleachers there, and it just I think this was taken like in North Fargo baseball diamond, and for some reason the bench was turned around, and that was kind of perfect because I kind of wanted to show the baseball field, and that you don't really get because usually the bench is facing the field, but for whatever reason the bench was turned around, so I was able to get kind of the baseball diamond behind him as well.
In the next photo, we get something that looks very Cinderella Man influenced
very
to me.
much.
It's got the old-timey radio. It's got old boxing gloves hanging. Of course, that look of the brick is a very pre-war look. And the thing I like about this next picture is I love the fact that this dude's got a black eye.
Yep.
So obviously he did not maybe do so well in his last bout, or he just took the beating, and this is, later on. What's your interpretation of this? Did he just lose a match? Did he win a match? What's going on?
I've been fighting that story even because I'm like, well, is he listening to the radio? Like there's a fight going on. And I think I named this one, there's a contender, and then there's also I could have been a contender. So I think this one was I could have been a contender. So he's got a black eye. He actually has some scars on his hands as well. But yeah, I mean, the radio is there to kind of like lead you into the story, but also is he sitting there listening to maybe a different boxing match that maybe he could have been the fighter, or is he just listening? He's obviously very depressed that he's not probably the winner of that fight. Boxing gloves hanging on the wall and such. But yeah, the radio there just kind of signifies that he's probably listening to it. But yeah, the lighting pattern too is just like something leads you, kind of get a triangle of objects here. There might be too many objects with the gloves, but it kind of brings you down. That's why the boxer is a little bit brighter of the images. Usually you want to show with light, the brightest part of the image is, where your eyes go to. And that's why I kind of made the boxer a little bit more lighter than the gloves and the radio.
How do you find your models?
Go through Facebook clients and just like Facebook, just who kind of has that story with him. He's Italian. It's my brother-in-law. So he's half Italian. So he's already got that boxing feel with kind of dark hair. And yeah, I think he even had that hat too. So I bought the suspenders, the shirt, the tank top, and he had the black pants. But yeah, usually
so you've got a closet somewhere that's just full of the weirdest stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Halloween comes once a year, but I can go through my closet and say like, oh, I think I'll be an astronaut this year. Or I'll be a steampunk person this year. But yeah, there's definitely going through my Facebook friends and just seeing who would fit the story for this.
I would like to, we're going to jump ahead to a couple of these other ones real quick. First of all, I love anytime you take a picture of Keith Burkholder.
He always has the face, and he's always like, I don't know why you'd want to take, I think it was even for this one. This one's called Lost in Translation with equations in the background. And he's always like, I don't know why you'd want to take a picture of me. I get that a lot with certain people that just have that story face. And yeah, it's always fun to photograph him.
Matt used to always tell the story about Keith. Because he loved to like, oh, my dad, he's this old doddering, he's an older gentleman, and he doesn't always quite get it. And the Valerie had made them tacos for dinner one night, and so they all sat down to eat. And apparently Keith said, "Oh, what kind of a sandwich is this?" And Matt would go, "Dad, it's tacos." And he's in his 40s, and he's talking to his dad like that. Anyways,
yeah, it's there's always great stories with him, and Valerie being his wife is really big into Santa Claus, and ever since he retired, he started on that beard. It's not as long as that Father Time beard, but he had the hair and the beard. He just looked like a scientist that has known. He probably has forgotten more than I'll ever know. That kind of tells a story of like the equations, and there's like different equations in the background. I had a lot of fun with that too, like Shazam equations in there, and Schrodinger's cat. That whole thing with that. There's different things in there that I just had fun with, the chalkboard and chalkboard paint, and just took that in the den of his house.
And so was it fun working with chalk? Because I've heard people say chalk coming back as like a medium that people are using for decorating is the worst thing ever.
Well, yeah, there's, my wife has like a little sign, then they can wipe it off and say, give thanks or happy holidays. They can change it every month now with chalk, and chalkboard paint being on the wall of a kid's room or something like that, they can use chalk to wipe away stories or to write down stuff on there. I
just wrote directly on the paint in my bedroom. And then my parents were like, what's this? And I was like, I was taking a message. Can't believe this. So an image that I think has become pretty famous for you is a little further down. You'll see a man in an old style diving helmet with a harpoon and a chest pulling what can only be described as booty out of the ocean.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about this image and then where it ended up.
Sure. Yeah. That's again, that was my story of like kind of going with that steampunk with finding that diving helmet. And I was like, I looked online, I looked at auctions and different antique places. There was a full size helmet that was about, I'd say $8,000 for a nice old fashioned helmet. I found this on Amazon for $40, and it's like a little table paperweight. So it was just like probably about the size of, I don't know, a little bit bigger than the size of your fist, but it was about $40. Bought that on Amazon and just photographed it separately underneath the same lighting. So I brought it at the photo shoot, and this was taken at Detroit Lakes. The beach is Detroit Lakes. The underwater is Detroit Lakes. Coming out of the water, I had like the trunk being pulled out of the lake, and then the ocean itself was taken in Oregon. Went there in 2009, and the rocks and then the ocean waves itself just put it on top of the Detroit Lakes lake. So I knew I was not going to be able to create this in an ocean type setting. So I knew, well, let's go to Detroit Lakes. And that way I can at least get the sand and such. And it was going to be storming that day. It kind of rained a little bit before we took this, so the clouds are mostly real. I added some other like kind of dramatic clouds in there, but for the most part, that sky was really there. And then, I had he's a professional bodybuilder, believe it or not. So
Oh, I believe it. I mean, that dude, I think
This
he's
is
got
not
a
a self-portrait,
12
so.
pack of abs in there.
Yep. He was my number. That's when you ask me how do I get my clients. Again, if I have a friend that's a bodybuilder, I think I'll use him for this shot of a treasure hunter. And then he was holding a stick, just kind of get this hand. I had the rope around his hand. Some of that stuff was photoshopped in, like the hose and the rope on his chest. He just had a red swimsuit on, so I kind of tore it up after that. But yeah, other than that, it's added the helmet, of course, in post, but just kind of set it right on top of it and just kind of blended it in to make it look as realistic as possible.
And this look it's gone some places, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been. It was a loan collection image at PPA. So PPA is kind of the international national photo competition. It's been around for 150 years and entered into competition, got some great feedback on there. And then I also, trying to think, I submitted it for a gallery through Kelby, which is kind of an online learning with photography. He does a lot of Photoshop and photography. He does like Photoshop World conventions in Florida and Vegas. And he came across it, and then they put it on Photoshop User Magazine, which is an international, sends it out to all their members and such. So that was kind of I used to read that and learn from that magazine when I was getting out of college and even in college, looking through the Photoshop User Magazine, like looking at the tips and tricks of how to create images. And this image was on the cover in March of 2016, I believe.
Which is really an honor. I mean, that's really amazing.
Yep.
They give you a free subscription for that as well?
No, it's, I think within like 6 months, they had just turned it into a digital subscription too. So it used to be like at Barnes & Noble and such, but I think they switched to a digital service, but I just printed out the cover and framed it that way. So
below this, you're mixing passions here with photography and a little bit of Star Wars.
Absolutely.
There. Was it your dream to do something with a little bit of a lightsaber twist to it?
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely a story that I kept trying to think of a fun story with that. And had the lightsaber. I mean, who doesn't have a lightsaber at home, right? So
Right. I know I do.
Yeah.
So I had the lightsaber. Let's see. The whole story with that was just kind of creating a story with a Jedi being hunted by stormtroopers. So looking at that image, I had Dave, who is has the full costume outfit of the stormtrooper. You'll probably see him at different events. I think last night he was at the Fargo Theater for the Star Wars holiday special that they had.
Is he part of the
501st? Yep. So he's part of the 501st. So he'll go any convention, goes to hospitals and such. Even though if I was in a hospital as a child, I don't know if I'd want to see a stormtrooper come in. But I mean, it's cool to see that. But I had him meet me. This is kind of like off Concordia. There's some wooded areas over there. So had him just kind of walk around different areas. He had his blaster, of course. And then I had Than, who's the Jedi. Got him, again, another Halloween costume of a Jedi. Added some stuff like the boots and such. I had to add some of the Star Wars feel boots to those. I didn't have those on hand, but everything else, like the toy ship in the background, that was just probably like a $13 ship that I got on Amazon. Took it through the mud and photographed it separately, just because I didn't have the fundings to buy a whole Starship Cruiser of the Star Wars ship. So
at least not yet.
Not yet.
Right? Yeah,
Hopefully, a few people buy this picture. I'd have the fundings for that.
Is there something where you've got a concept, but you can't find a particular prop or costume piece, but you've thought about it that maybe the JJ Meets World audience could connect you with? Anything out there you're looking for?
I don't know. Right now, I'm trying to think of a cool way to do Anubis or Egyptian. He was the feather in the heart. Trying to find like a cool scale or makeup would be kind of a cool thing too. Is just getting like maybe working with a little bit more of a makeup artist of doing a lot of creative fun images with that, instead of having to do that in Photoshop, to actually get someone to be full on makeup of Egyptian goddess or god, and do something with like Anubis, which was kind of a jackal face, but even so, just do something with Egyptian would be kind of fun to do. But yeah, there's always like a folder of ideas that I have eventually that I want to get to. But that's kind of like where I'm at in my career, is where I can think of something and then be able to achieve it with Photoshop. Is just like there's no limits to that.
You've really found that amazing balance that artists want to find, which is I'm making enough money using this art
Yep.
to allow me to work on projects I want to do
Yeah,
as
definitely.
well.
I mean, personal projects are very important to kind of learn their craft and figure out what you want to do. And that's why, I did some landscape stuff. That was fun. I got to learn, how to take a great landscape. And then I moved on to portraits. And then to be able to combine portraits with landscape is kind of nice, because then you can kind of do stuff where maybe people didn't know how to do that. So being able to just kind of keep challenging yourself, like I want to be able to put an astronaut on a different planet, and I was able to do that with the picture before the Jedi and after the diver. But I mean, just being able to create that is something in my head, and then be able to translate that into art. It's kind of fun to do. Kind of keep challenging.
What's the phrase? The cobbler's shoes, or
The
Never has.
cobbler's children
Just-
go without shoes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, do you do all your family photos as well? or-
Sometimes I usually have a photographer friend, Kevin. TaylorMade Photography plug is usually I have him photograph my family, just because I don't typically want to like have my camera on a tripod. North Dakota winds are kind of uncontrollable, and I don't want to have like my camera blow off and fall down. So, or I set up lights and such, and if I'm not able to hold those down, usually I do hire sometimes a photographer. And I've got pictures in my house, which I think, again, I mentioned that earlier. It's kind of important to have pictures in your house, because it kind of shows like that it kind of has your children say like, oh, hey, my parents do love me. They have pictures
Yeah.
of me on the wall.
Canon or Nikon?
A little bit of, I've been shooting Canon since 2003, but I'm also Fuji as well. So
Okay.
mirrorless is kind of I would say in the last 4 years, people have been slowly transitioning to mirrorless, a little bit lighter weight camera. If for those that do weddings and such or events, they don't want to hold this huge camera with a battery pack with a 70 to 200 lens. You're talking about 5 pounds that you're always like lifting up or having around your neck. Mirrorless is just a little bit lighter weight, a little bit maybe even better in focusing and such. So I've been in the last year and a half been Fuji.
That's kind of interesting, huh?
Yeah.
What about I see that you have a Macintosh computer in front of you. Are you a
Correct.
Mac user by choice, or is it just what
yeah.
it's always been?
It's just been like that. I was a PC guy. My brother built computers. He built me a PC in the early 2000s, but college, it was for graphic design. It was kind of mandatory to have a Mac, because that's how they kind of taught was within design. Illustrator, Photoshop, they wanted you to be on a Mac. So I bought the iBook 2001, I believe. So since then, I've always been kind of I have an iMac MacBook Pro. So it's always been Mac since probably 2001.
You know what they've been crushing it with on Macs that I just want to bring up is their power cable connection, using that magnetic connection was
Yep.
really a stroke of
Yep.
genius, because I had an old iBook back in the day where I was constantly ruining the pin that had to plug in.
Yep.
And then those things were
Knock
like
it down.
JJ was just
$80.
notorious for having laptops that were just all banged up and dented
Yeah.
because they'd fall and overheat. And
Oh, yeah.
he just punished those things.
I did. But like you take one of my favorite laptops was my MacBook Pro that I got in 2008. And I remember it fell from the top concession shelf in the Fargo Theater.
Jeez.
I dropped it down an entire flight of stairs at NDSU. But that thing lasted me until 2016.
Yeah.
The longevity of some of those products is just amazing.
Yeah, I usually have it kind of higher off the ground on a fan too, so it just doesn't get overheated on the bottom. And this one's been lasting me probably a good 5 years as well. So I mean, as long as you don't get a lemon, and just if it doesn't crash in the first couple of years, it probably won't for 6-7 years.
I always tell people, get the Apple Care.
Yeah.
Just that way, if anything goes wrong, you've
It'll
got
happen.
something.
It'll happen a week after it's expired.
Right,
though.
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's happened where it's like, oh, this is good for 4 years, and like 4 years and 2 days it crashes. So
Almost completely unrelated to what we're talking about with you, but do you guys know about Costco's return policy?
Yeah.
I do not.
So Costco will accept any product you buy back with a virtually unlimited time frame. So a couple previous guests actually have worked for Costco, and they'll tell me things like people will come and buy plants and shrubs at the beginning of the season and then pull them out of the ground in mid-September and return them, and Costco will take them back and give them their full purchase price back. Years ago, I got a PlayStation 3 it was my PlayStation 4, excuse me. I got my PS4 from Costco because you got an extra controller with it and you got a year's worth of PlayStation Plus. A year after I purchased it, like literally to the day after I purchased it, the disk drive went out on it. And so it was worthless. It became a hunk of non-working machinery. And so I called Sony and they're like, ooh, yeah, you're a day and a half outside of your warranty. And I said, well, yeah, I'm a day and a half. Couldn't you, do something? Nope. So I'm super bummed, and I go into Costco, and I happen to be talking to one of my friends. He's like, you bought that here, right? I said, yep. He goes, bring it in. I said, well, I don't have the box. I don't have the receipt. Bring it in. They'll find the receipt for you. So I brought it in. They found the receipt, and they go, and I brought it in a Hornbacher's bag, so a shopping
Classy,
bag,
yeah.
and I gave it to them, and I only brought like the power cord and the HDMI cable that came with it. That's it. And they took it back. I mean, they took it back, and it was maybe a 2-minute ordeal of them going, okay, well, we found your receipt. Here you go. And do you want to just replace it, or do you want the money for it? And I said, well, I'd like to replace it. They're like, great, go grab one off the shelf.
That's awesome.
So I got to grab another box, which came with another controller and another year of PS Plus. And it was no sweat. And so... and the people used to take advantage of it with the TVs, and so they'd buy a TV, and then 6 months later they'd come in and just upgrade to the next one and upgrade to the next one. And so TVs now are the one thing that they will not just accept back just anytime you want. But it is amazing. I love that company. Costco, they just are crushing it
What
left
if you get
and
like
right.
a big thing of cheese balls and you get about a third of the way through and you're like, yeah, I don't think I like this
Yeah,
anymore.
right.
So you can bring it in. And if you tell them, like, listen, these started to
Little
taste
stale.
weird, anything like that, they will take it back because they want you to be happy. And here's the thing. That's why Costco only carries certain products, because the manufacturers of these products knows that Costco is going to hold them accountable for their customers' taste. So, for example, you notice that you don't see Apple products at Costco, and it's probably because Apple doesn't want to adhere to Costco's return policy in it, but they're just
Yeah, no,
amazing people.
A couple times I've been to Costco, sometimes they have things, and then I come back a month later and they don't have those things anymore. It's like, oh yeah, we don't. Sometimes we get them in, sometimes we don't. It's like kind of a frustration thing with like, will it be there on the shelves this month? But
You can read Costco prices, and there's a hidden language to them. So if something is like $8.19, if it's a number that ends in a 9 that's not a 99, it means that it's a product that is being phased out for whatever reason. I don't know if that's exactly it, but you can Google it. There's a whole language of pricing in there, so that like, oh, okay, I'm not going to buy Oreos this week because according to this price, next week it's going to go on sale. Or if something is marked down by X number of %, it means that this is the last pallet of it and they need to make room for another product. So now it's time to load up on socks.
all the different types of Oreos that they have now. With
It's ridiculous, right? What are
it's
they
amazing.
doing? Well, no,
It's
no.
amazing.
have you tried the cherry Coke?
Well, I just don't
Oreos?
like cherry Coke in
Okay,
general.
well, there's
And
like-
there's not going to be flavors for everybody.
Like, I hear popping in my head when I eat those. I was like, am I having an aneurysm right now? Because it was so weird. It's like cherry Coke Oreos. I was like, I know this is going to be horrible, but I'm going to at least try it. But
Chica cherry Oreo. Which flavors do you like? Outside the traditional Oreo flavor.
No, I'm not
Mint.
saying that, oh, they're my favorite. I'm saying it's great that they're doing it.
No, it's not.
Why isn't it?
Because almost all of them are fails.
JJ, are you losing out on the regular Oreos? I don't think so. They still make and sell those.
But you know what? I will tell you this much. The confusion of someone being like, I picked up Oreos today, my
Yeah.
wife. And then I'm all excited. and I
Birthday
pour
cake
myself.
Oreos.
Yeah, I got a big glass of milk and I'm like, Mickey Mouse birthday cake. What's this kind of
that
BS?
sounds good, though.
Confetti.
It's not.
I bet it is.
Also, by the way, they've now got this like momentum stuffed, which is truly like 2.5 times the original amount of stuffing.
Our friend Toby Jones does Oreo double stuffed reviews on Instagram. And so I follow his reviews for every new flavor. And so far he's liked almost all of them. So I'm on board.
He is ridiculous because I've tried a lot of them, and like the watermelon one made me want to throw up. It was just awful.
Yeah, I'm really considering if they know who they are trying to service, because they have like the thin, they have the double stuff. We have something for everybody. But
What are the jelly beans in Harry Potter that have...
Bernie Bott's every flavor beans.
So they need that for Oreos. So like you've got a bag of Oreos, and like I don't know which ones this one's gonna be.
no, the Jelly Bellies mystery like throw up and
You get a double stuffed vomit one.
You
Yeah.
get a, there's a double stuff next to the Oreo, like the Centennial Oreo next to. That actually is not a bad idea, and you can call it like the kitchen sink or grab bag Oreos.
Right.
You know who else is taking this approach? Dan, I know this is nothing to do with photography, but just go along with us.
Yep.
The Cheez-Its Corporation.
Yeah, that's true.
They are also swinging for the fences, and I think they're starting to bastardize their own product.
Have you seen their Cheez-Its that are Scrabble pieces?
Yeah.
They're
That's
tasty.
actually pretty smart.
They're
They-
tasty,
they
but
taste
they have
the
no
same.
points on them though.
Oh, okay.
So that's the problem, is that you'd have to have like a points guide to play with them.
Yeah.
But that's still
under
pretty clever.
The same company, Nabisco. Is Nabisco?
Yeah, I believe
same?
it's Nabisco who makes it. So the one product that I have to really tip my hat to for Cheez-Its is that because they've got like jalapeno and cheddar jack now and all of these. One of them is called like Extra Crispy, and they're the burnt Cheez-Its. They're Cheez-Its that had been baked too long, that for decades have been thrown away and scraped off the pan, and someone was like, whoa, 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 whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa. Put that in a box.
Yeah.
We'll call them Extra Crispy.
Every part of the buffalo.
Yeah.
Every part of the buffalo.
And I was like, you people are just, you're buying you're buying garbage. You're literally buying garbage, which is what I think that the Oreo Corporation is doing as well.
Oh, really? Like, oh, these ones came out mint on accident.
Well, they're like,
How'd
listen,
that happen?
They're listen, JW Watermelon Patch over here has got all of these watermelon rinds, and he needs something to do with it. And he was just wondering, could we grind them up, add some red food coloring?
Coffee Oreos.
Yeah, ever since that Watermelon Patch family emigrated here from Spain, they've just been ruining Oreos.
Yeah, they have been. Not as bad quite, though, as like when the Disney Corporation gets their hands on
Make
Oreos.
Oreos great again.
Make Oreos great again. Oh, are we writing a Mad TV skit here? I think we might be. Dan, other passions for you? Of course, we touched on Star Wars, but you're also a big fan of wrestling.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, who isn't, right? The 80s. I grew up in the 80s.
To be honest, me. I know very little about wrestling.
No, I mean, it's wrestling, Star Wars, photography. I'm passionate about people that are passionate about certain things. I mean, you know, you have those definitely passionate wrestler fans, and I wouldn't say I'm a passionate wrestling fan, but it's always fun to like, hey, what's on right now and whatnot. But like Star Wars, you definitely have those passionate fans, and Star Trek even too. But I love passion and other things that I'm a part of, like, I mean, just movies in general too. So I used to have he actually lives in Hollywood right now, but we went to movies all the time as kids. So like every Friday we would watch a movie, and so currently I'm actually I've written like a screenplay like 10 years ago about auctions. Like back in the day, it was like, you know, like 12 years ago, I was thinking like a mockumentary about people that go to auctions. So I don't know if you've ever been to Villards in Moorhead, and there's always like some character people that go to auctions. And I actually wrote a screenplay with that. And now I'm creating a new screenplay. I'm about 30 pages in. So that's always like, even though I'm busy with photography, I'm busy with other things, there's always some fun stuff that I just try to keep busy with other things too. But
You know, there's a yearly auctioneer convention that takes place in Moorhead. You should go there just to, you know, get some ideas for your script. And I was like, what happens there? What other conversations? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? I'm pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. How are the kids? How are the kids? How are the kids?
You just walk around. I mean, it's definitely characters. There's someone that my parents used to know, and he was a multimillionaire, and he had like duct tape wrapped around his boots and his jeans. You know, there's always, you know, characters that.
Oh,
that
you
are
don't
there.
get rich by spending it. That's for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But also then you get the kind of money where you don't care anymore, where it's like, I duct tape my shoes, whatever. I'm also a millionaire.
Yeah. be like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy your house and foreclose on you."
Yeah.
There'll be, there'll be people that are like, "Oh, I like this," and they'll move it from one box to another box. So maybe,
Oh, yeah.
there's some dirty stuff there, but it's there's those type of characters. I just think could make a great like mockumentary of like if you like Best in Show. You know, when I did not know what to expect when I first watched that movie, and I just thought it was hilarious.
I think anyone who's ever done
Dog show
community
movie.
theater knows that waiting for Guffman is incredibly true.
Yeah.
Every aspect of it. And so Christopher Guest is just,
Yep.
he's really good at like latching onto those things that are universal truths for a select niche of people and exposing it to the rest of the world.
Yep, I'm gonna make a movie about a dog show. Like that's gutsy, but
He also made a movie about that was not it was not like an improvised mockumentary style format about Lewis and Clark, but a rival Lewis and Clark that was also sent out at the time. It's called Almost Heroes, starring Matthew Perry and Chris Farley.
Chris Farley,
which I
That was
think
a
is
Christopher Guest movie?
yeah,
Really?
which I think is really funny. But when you watch it, it is pretty much bottom of the barrel stuff. Although there's an amazing sequence that takes place where the guys are telling stories around this campfire, and this guy is telling a story, and it's got a good twist on it, and it's about sheep dung that is just you Google it. Hey, and speaking of Googling. So, Dan, if people are looking to hire you, if they're looking to pitch you an idea, or maybe they have got an actual NASA, astronaut's
Absolutely.
suit,
Yeah.
how are they going to get hold of you?
yeah, you can website. There's a way to contact me off my website of just danfrancisphotography.com, and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter's all the thing. Dan Francis Photo. You can look at some of my work that I've previously done and continue to do.
Great. Dan, thanks for coming by today.
Yeah, thanks.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. I took a photo of a man once, and then he started aging in reverse.